button. Good, we're recording, so let's go ahead and get the TST meeting started. What I wanted to do today was make a pass over the release planning document that UN has been putting together and soliciting help from a number of people. There's plenty of detail that we could drill down on, and maybe a little bit of that is appropriate, but this is not a release planning meeting. This is a meta discussion about how we're going to organize that, and a little bit of attention, I think, to starting to organize priorities, relationships between various other projects, and how we coordinate all of that. And it also, we're going to hit on trying to bring related activities that are drawing against our engineering resources under this umbrella so we can track what's going on, make sure we're paying attention to priorities and so on. All right, so with that little bit of introduction, and I got a couple emails that on other topics, but I think they pop up as we make a little progress through this document. If I miss anything, we'll come back and hit those with a few minutes towards the end. All right, so Yuen, by the way, please speak up at any point if I get off track on the intent here. But it kind of starts with, again, we're primarily Cord as a whole focused, and that has a very strong emphasis on platform. There will be features that correspond to, for example, there's the feature of mCord configuration, making it configuration of acord and so on. And we need to figure out how to coordinate all of those as well. But this has a strong emphasis on the platform. So you'll see the target features here, which, as you know from the timeline, we've got one sprint left to make progress on this. There's there's sprint planning tomorrow. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So, and there's been a number of emails exchanged. So I think everyone is up to speed on, trying to bring to completion, some number of these features. These are approximately in priority order. We're not going to, I don't think we're going to, hopefully we'll make progress. We're making good progress in auto configuration. We won't, I don't know if that will ever be done, but, and same thing on OAM, we're not going to be done there, but I'd like to wrap up, for example, vRouter as an example. And so I'm not going to spend time on mysterious decision. That's the next sprint planning. But just the structure of it, you'll see that there also is this, in addition to the target features, there's exploratory work that's been going on in parallel. No expectation that these will be finished, but it's work that needed to be done, or we had parties interested in doing the work for all of these that will then show up in Dangerous Edition, probably as target features, or at least somewhere down the road they'll show up as high priorities. All right, so turning attention to danger. Yeah, go ahead.
I had a chat with the Radisson folks, and it wasn't clear to me that mCord was actually going to make it.
Yeah, so.
So do we have clarification?
We do not have clarification. So I would still treat those as target, and I think that one was the most speculative, but I decided just to leave it there for now. Because no one had said no. So for now it's done. I think the door's open for at least some partial version of all of the other ones though. Okay, so moving to Dangerous Edition, and we will again do a deeper planning session at some point. This was my first cut at the targets. It's a long list. You will see my best estimate as to what I thought were the highest priority, and then medium priority and low priority. Everything is important. We're just not going to get everything done. And those things that didn't make the cut, I just pushed off into September, although we can revisit here. So let me just get a sense of the room as to whether this list of priorities is in the ballpark. Are there things that I just totally missed, or that you don't think there's a prayer we're going to get done? that kind of looking for coarse-grained comments on the target features for the next release.
So Larry, what I'm seeing is largely like incremental improvements to either the platform or XOS. And last call we had talked about having a discussion about whether we wanted to revisit the design of XOS or the implementation of XOS. So what do you want to do about that?
So the way that I'm treating that is we still have that meeting scheduled for next week, so we'll have it.
Okay.
I believe, well, we're playing with words as to whether the outcome of that meeting is target feature redesign of XOS or the target feature is capability to do XYZ, which is more focused on the feature rather than the component. So
Okay.
short answer is that let's work on it next week. The slightly longer answer is I think we have I would prefer to keep this feature focused rather than component focused as much as it makes sense.
I think, Larry, the only issue there is, right, if we plan to do major changes to XOS, the features that we would be targeting in this release would decrease dramatically, right? And so that's the trade-off that we're going to have to take into account.
Absolutely. But every one of these features, I mean, for example, light and write Cord, if we decided that was our focus, there's a lot of work to do there too. I mean, every one of these blows up into potentially blows up into a lot of work. Some of them truly are incremental, I guess, to Ali's point. Some of them are more, will take a lot of work. But the short answer is this list is not final. This was a first draft, and we have that discussion to have next week.
Yeah, my concern is if we take too much of a feature point of view, and I understand why we would want to do that to some extent, but if we take too much of a feature view, we risk of cutting verticals across the system and basically always adding code that's similar to previously existing code, but never really reusing code and never really having a platform.
Well, I think my argument there is I don't think it's a feature versus, right? I think we're talking about features, but to me, we're either targeting features or we do some of this refactoring or rewriting of XOS because that's the core platform. So to me, it's an upfront decision of is it one or the other, and if it's one, then it's focusing on getting the platform redone rather than focusing on all of these features. So to me, it's an either or, with maybe some features being possible to do with the platform being, completely redone.
Yeah.
So I don't know that it's a feature versus a component argument.
Let's table this for a moment because there's a slide coming up that kind of hits at a way of thinking about the aggregate of the platform, and maybe we'll tease out some issues there. Point noted, we still have this issue to resolve.
So one thing that's missing in the high priority is a number of Fabric features that we are working on for Comcast.
Yes, and that's the discussion that we needed to have. So I've incorporated the Fabric features in terms of 2 additional slide sets. We haven't gone through the discussion to see where they slot into this. And that was the meeting I think I've been trying to get with both of you.
Yeah, okay. I'm just making note that there is a bullet here for Fabric enhancements. And okay, so the model here is for everything on this list. There's a slide that will follow that tries to spell it out in a little bit more detail. And we would clearly need. I mean, they add definition to these one-liners, obviously. Okay, so that's the basic model. That's a very long list. Let me just actually talk about a couple of these. So, for example, I've got Volta in here. From one point of view, this is just a very natural, we need more access devices. From another point of view, Volta is this project that has its own pace and agenda and so on. Arguably no different than MCord, or this almost could have been labeled the RCord project if you wanted to look at it that way. My view is that each one of these, once we declare a project, it, as we've discussed before, will result in features needing to go into the platform roadmap so that that project can make progress, but that it has its own roadmap. Now, if you look at actually the next slide, I went ahead and, there's one there for eCord, and there's the following one, there's one there for MCord. So it would be nice at sort of a comparable level to understand what the eCord and MCord roadmaps look like. Although in this setting, not necessarily drilling down on those like we will with the platform. It's only the platform that we'll drill down on. So it's kind of an organizational question. Ought we treat Volta as like eCord and MCord, such that we really needed the Volta roadmap? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
how do you think about it?
No, absolutely. I think that would be good. That's something I need to talk to with the Volta team, and yeah, we want to have a roadmap.
Okay, so just for the sake of argument here, I'm just going to add the Volta roadmap here, and oops. Okay, so we need a Volta roadmap. All right, so you get the idea, and let me see if there's anything else here that really required discussion. All right, so each one of these comes with a slide later on, either at the roadmap level if it's one of the related projects, or at a drill down level if it's a feature within the umbrella of the platform. Yeah, so now we're just trying to get the general shape of what we're trying to do. So we have a couple slides on JIRA conventions. And let me turn it over to you to just walk through these. And I'd like to get agreement, and I'd like to get a little discipline in how we do this so that it's easier.
Here's where we woke up this morning.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we've actually run this through the Ono's team also. This is kind of taking JIRA and proposing a different approach to it. So today there's a concept of versions that we're currently not using. So all of this is really intended to build kind of a prioritized list that we as a team try to tackle, right? So using the concept of versions in JIRA, the intent is as part of release planning to capture all the things that we plan to do within the release. And then what we'll do is we'll take epics, which currently is essentially used for components, and make those features. And so what we would have is within each versions, we would have a list of prioritized epics or features that we would tackle, and then that we would identify as part of release planning. And then for components, we'll take some of the current epics and then treat them as components. JIRA today actually has the concept of components, and so what you can do is you can say a user story is associated with some components. And then next slide. And then we would have user stories, and so user stories would be associated with an epic. So if you look at it from kind of a hierarchical standpoint, we're going to have a release with a prioritized set of epics. Within the epics, then there would be user stories that would be needed to accomplish the epic. As part of release planning, what we would then establish is that the set of epics and to some extent user stories and story points that would be associated with the work that would be needed for the release. And then one of the things that we want to talk about is really acceptance criteria. So ideally what you want to do is within each user story to identify the acceptance criteria, right? QA being kind of a core component of that. But one of the gotchas we're going to have to deal with is the resource constraint that we have with QA. So initially, I think what we'll focus on is to have QA as part of the epic or the feature, so that we don't see a feature is released until the quality is there. But what we could say is we're not exactly going to rip the feature out, right? But we would say the feature is maybe more experimental. Other aspects of acceptance criteria, we want to make sure that documentation, unit regression tests, all of those are in place. And so those are some of the things that we can start looking as we get into release planning and Jira usage and planning.
Thanks.
Any questions or comments?
I'd like to call attention to this one, which is we have called this out as a feature in the past. One of the epics in Mysterious Decision is that we get everything configured. I would really like to see it, at the same level of documentation in QA that configuration, features are all plumbed through. We're trying to get a few in place as examples, but that we just make that part of the acceptance criteria. Other comments?
So is anyone going to go through our Jira to redo it to these conventions?
Yes. We're planning to start this week to start working on Dangerous Edition, get the versioning and the epics that we're defining here in place in there. I think what we're going to have to do is for the existing stuff, we're going to have to work through those and start migrating, right, the leftover backlogs and what we need to do into that convention. So that'll probably be kind of the second stage.
Right. There will be features in Mysterious Decision that just did not get completed, so we'll have to bring those over and finish them as well, or refactor them with other things, whatever makes sense. I see some comments. What are the comments? Oh, sorry, this is for another slide. Anything else on Jira? All right, so let's move to externally visible deliverables. We're trying to track all the promises we've made to the outside world, because then clearly we need to deliver on them. The releases are a kind of promise, so those are highlighted in bold, but we have demos, we have proof of concepts, we have tutorials we've promised, and so on. So first of all, we absolutely have to keep these recorded, and it's part of our planning process. It's not parallel to our planning. It has to be part of our planning. This is what I know about, and so first of all, is there something that's missed, and we missed here? And let me just comment on Bill's DT demo in November, and arguably there are other things in here that are at the same level. Some of this is not public information, so I'm not quite sure how to deal with it.
Hey, Larry, what's the eCord with NTT field trial? NTT is going to do a field trial with disaggregated ROADM.
Okay.
That's the only thing they committed to. So there's a guy, he talked to me a few times on a field about a field trial with eCord, but no commitments, no real relevant,
Okay.
information. So I would take this one out.
Thanks. Good. Thanks.
And in terms of eCord, the thing missing is China Unicom, but I think we need to sync up with them and see what what their commitment to eCord is versus doing their own thing.
Well, all right. So let me just add it for now. Would that be just a proof of concept? What are they talking about?
They're talking about field trial in collaboration with Huawei, but I'm not keen on putting it on there in the sense that I have no real control at this time.
So you would maybe rather not do that?
Well, with the question marks is okay.
Yeah.
And it's Unicom. China Unicom.
Oh, Unicom, sorry. Anything else that we've missed? Okay. But in any case, you get the point. We really need to track these. So this is out there. We slipped a little bit. I think the feature freeze is probably going to be the 28th. And this sprint 8 is actually running, I'm going to count it as actually already getting started as of the 7th. 14th, 24th, yeah, that's 3 weeks minus. That only leaves a short while here for hardening, but that's where we are. I mean, we always have the option of delaying the release, but the good thing, I guess, is technically we're targeting the 1st of January, which means if we slip sometime in January, it's still January. But and the next slide is release highlights, but that's kind of a cut and paste right now. I think that will be. Was this supposed to be for Mysterious Decision or for the next release?
Mysterious Decision. This was just for us to track it. I think once we get into release planning, these slides will be gone, because for us it was inventorying what's currently there today for Mysterious Decision. And then honestly, part of this is also looking at it and seeing what have we done and what backlog we have left for the next release. Right, because that'll eat into any features we want to do for the next release.
Well, so maybe this one really turns into a backlog moves forward or something like that. Is that what this is about?
Yes, because if you look at there's the delivered and then the to-do. And so with the to-do, it was also trying to figure out what feature it was captured as.
Okay,
so
good.
Onboard monitoring as a service, for example.
Good. So there's an analysis that will go on and be recorded here at the point we do planning. All right, so then the schedule for the next release, as best we understand it today, is here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sprints, followed by 2 weeks of release candidate iteration. How did this? Okay, this would be. Oh, I'm sorry. Never mind. All right. So this is when I did the forward reference earlier about what is the platform and so on. This is I've got a couple slides of architecture here, and it's not the typical block diagram. In my mind, it is almost how we have self-organized. It's partly about subsystems, but it's also how we have organized ourselves into implicit teams. And I don't have all the teams necessarily, all the right names down, but I was just trying to take a quick shot at it. There are people working on the build system, okay? And that has at least Metal as a Service, the platform install, the service onboarding, service profile stage, and then the test harness. And these are the folks most active, just roughly speaking, and I'm not trying to allocate or account for time, but those are the people most active in aspects of the build system. And that's obviously a very active thing that goes on Slack right now as people try to build Cord. Then there's the XOS subsystem. And again, there is a pseudo team that tends to focus there. And you know, we're not getting a lot of cross-pollination between the Trellis team and the XOS team, for example. That's something I think we should address. But there's the data model, the synchronizer, and then this sequence of APIs, at least GUI, REST API, and Tosca. There's the Trellis subsystem, which includes the Fabric and VTN and some other services, vRouter, pseudowire in progress. just let me finish again, this is broadly defined the core. And now core doesn't mean platform per se. It means core is what we wrap up in a reference implementation. So on the access side, we have the Volta and Volt components, and I just didn't have all the names there, so someone can come in and fill in the right set of names for Volta. We also have a set of reference services, so this is not platform, but it is part of the reference release. So VSG, VCDN, and monitoring as a service / Acord are example services that will get included as we go forward. We do not have very many people working here. This is actually, we're very focused on platform and not so focused on the services that go into the platform. And that's at some point, I hope that balance shifts a little bit. This is also then where I recorded the major external dependencies. And I know there's a discussion around ONOS here. Let me just finish the high-level description, then we can come back to that one. And I also wanted to record that these are demos and deployments, but there are quote-unquote teams that are focused on these, and it tends to be Ali and Jono that pull together demos and take them on the road. I don't know, maybe this turns into brigades at some point, but for right now, we tend to cluster around deployments or field trials or proofs of concept that we're working on, and people get pulled into that. So this is a combination of subsystems and implicit teams. So let me just open the floor for comment on that, and then if we want to drill down on specifics, we can do that too.
Larry, this is Tom Chopek. On Ubuntu, I know there are some servers.
Could you get a little closer to the mic?
Yeah, I was just saying that there is some interest in some folks porting ONOS to ARM-based servers, and they're working with Ubuntu 16.02 or something. I think the next version of the Ubuntu. I'm just curious to know, is that a big deal from our perspective to also be on a higher level Ubuntu? Really?
So you raised an issue.
So we should move away from 14.
Right. So there's the issue of
sorry,
actually
we should.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Sorry. We should move away from. We should upgrade to 1604 at some point. I don't know when, but that holds true as well for OpenStack. Like OpenStack Kilo is nearly end of life or whatever they call it, end of support. So all these things we need to upgrade as well.
All right, so this one maybe deserves its own slide because this could blow up into a lot more work. So Kilo and Ubuntu are two good examples. How do we manage these dependencies?
How do you mean?
Well, my main observation is that we do have to schedule time to upgrade. Just take Ubuntu or upgrade from Kilo. We need to schedule time to do that. It needs to therefore be prioritized with everything else.
Yeah. So I mean, the problem with upgrading, say, OpenStack or Ubuntu is that as we build, let's say, the build system, we make a lot of assumptions of the underlying OS. So, for example, I know that like the provisioner container that basically takes a compute node through its lifecycle won't work on Ubuntu 16.04 because the version of MAS is a new one and the APIs have changed, and the state machine has changed as well. So there's some of these dependencies are larger than others. If you want to upgrade Docker to a new version, that's not a biggie. But like OpenStack, Ubuntu, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it is. It is a big deal. So I know we have a specific issue here around ONOS. I don't know, Saurav, you're the right one to talk about that?
Yeah. So since 1.7 was released, we have moved to OFDPA 3.0, almost completely moved over. And that has required changes to ONOS core, the driver for sure, and even the application has changed for the fabric control just because we have removed some of the workarounds that we had done in 1.7 when there were still bugs with the older version of OFDPA. So what that means is that ONOS 1.7, Cord 1.0, all of that works for the older version of OFDPA. And since in master right now, we have moved over to the new version of OFDPA and brought about all of these changes, it only makes sense for me to have this release, this B release, to also use ONOS 1.8. Instead of backporting all of the changes that we have made into 1.7. I don't see the point in doing that.
All right, so that would argue dependency. And what is the status with the ONOS releases?
The next ONOS release is halfway through our feature freeze, I think.
And which release is the next one?
1.8.
Is 1.8.
Yeah. So the reason why I want to stick with 1.7 is because last time we depended on snapshots of ONOS because we were on 1.6, and depending on snapshots is difficult because they expire, they're never always there, so that makes things hard. So I would rather rely on a released version of ONOS rather than a in-progress version of ONOS. And with that, we never know what kind of bugs creep into the next version of ONOS that could delay our own release schedule as well. So I just think it's better to stick with the old version. Although I do see Saurav's point that backporting all the fabric changes might be difficult. I don't know. I mean, how difficult is that to do?
Can we do a beta release on 1.8 or minor small release?
Sorry, can you come closer to the mic?
Where's the mic? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Can we do a beta release or RC release on ONOS 1.8? Because right now the ONOS release cycle is too long, and actually make it really hard to, do this kind of release management between these two projects. So I'm wondering if we want to, the ultimate solution would be shorten the release cycle of ONOS to have some like beta or minor versions. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, how is that different than a 1.72 version of ONOS? I mean, were you suggesting?
ONOS is planning to do shorter incremental releases, but it's really intended for integrating and actually testing. But if you're releasing, you want the official releases, which is still on 3-month cycles.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean.
So the alternative here is that we slide our release back to wait for 1.8. I mean, we're only off by a week or two.
Yeah. I mean, maybe also understanding how much work is it to backport the fabric changes.
I don't know.
Ballpark, some sort of numbers.
We have made a lot of changes since we moved forward to OFDPA 3.0, right? So I don't know.
It's a lot of change.
I don't know how much conflict there will be if we want to export.
Yeah.
So there's not only a number of changes in the code itself, but all our documentation for Cord 1.0 assumed that you're using ONOS 1.7 and the older version of OFDPA, right? And there are people out in the field who are trying to set up the fabric with that documentation and the older version of OFDPA. So
okay.
you now backport these changes, then you're forcing people to move off of what they're doing right now and starting to use the newer version of OFDPA. I don't
really.
really want to do that.
They're still able to use the same version that they're using now, right? If you make a new release 1.72, they can still use 1.71. It's still a release version. It still exists. I think the large we can make an exception here or move to 1.8, but this shows a different problem, right? The issue is that we have the Fabric subsystem that's following that's inside ONOS, therefore following the master branch of ONOS, and therefore any changes you need to make to upgrade the Fabric, you're making it in the master branch, which goes to the next version of ONOS, which is not in sync with Cord, meaning that somehow we have to track the ONOS changes much more closely, and we can't fix ourselves to one version of ONOS per release. So maybe this is a larger point that we should make, that like the Fabric app needs to be pulled out of ONOS and put in the Cord repos so that it can follow so that it can have its own release cycle, and any changes that have to be made will be made in the version of ONOS which is slated for the release with Cord. Does that make sense?
And what happens if we need an API change in ONOS?
What do you, like what? Like, I don't know. I mean, well, first, you're not supposed to make API changes just like that. I
mean, if we need to implement something in ONOS, not only the same routing app, then what happens?
Right. So that's why we have support branches, and that's why we can make changes we can release new versions of a released ONOS. The whole idea. You're not supposed to make sweeping changes, but if you make small changes, then that's fine. But API changes, that's a different discussion altogether. We're already doing our API changes all correctly, so we really should be a little more careful about how we do this.
So sir, Ali made a very concrete suggestion about moving the Fabric into the Cord repo. Do we need a meeting on that, or do you agree?
I think we need to meet on that.
All right. All right, so just for a moment, the meta issue here is we need to do a much better job of tracking these external and treat these as external projects, even though we have insider access to at least one of them.
I think that's the highest point, is that just because ONOS lives under the same roof as us, it doesn't mean that we can treat it specially.
Right.
We need to be very, very careful about how we do this. Otherwise, every release we're going to go through this same discussion.
That's high point one. High level point two is we need to, in our release planning, pay a lot of attention to tracking the requirements for upgrades. So we had one requirement for an upgrade to Ubuntu 16.04, but that has ramifications down the stack, OpenStack, and so on. Right. So nothing else to resolve. Just an awareness on that. Anything else on the architecture? What time do we have? 20 more minutes. All right. So moving on. There was just a quick summary at a high level of trying to track the other related projects. So similar for eCord. And again, the big thing here on the architecture is what are the platform asks? And I think, I don't know if Srikanth is there, but we probably ought to do the same thing for aCord. I think it's just grown large enough, or has the potential to grow large enough, that we ought to, and Volta, as we already talked about.
Larry.
Yeah.
the team here only include our lab people?
I can't quite hear you.
Or you include? When you say the team here, it only include the lab people, or it include all the collaborators?
I'm still sorry. I'm not following. If you're talking about if you're asking about the team, this is the MCord, the entire MCord team. Whoever is taking on engineering responsibilities.
Oh, I see. Okay. Maybe later on, there's several people. Maybe later on, right now I'm adding it to here and parallelly to you, not only myself here.
No. This is I hadn't completed this. I had not completed this yet. Please come in and finish this.
Okay.
Yeah. So assignments is if you saw a slide in here that was half-assed and not very complete, and you know the details to fill it out, please do. I don't know if this is. Oh, this was the Fabric prioritized feature list. I haven't looked at this one yet. What's the high level comment on this?
Lots of features requested by Comcast. There's actually a couple that don't show up on these two slides. Most of them actually help the community in large, because things like IPv6 support, it's not just Comcast that has asked for it. So that entity has asked as well. So, things like these are generic. There's a couple of things maybe that are just Comcast specific, but the other one thing to point out probably on the next slide is that there is the need for netconf yang support to bring up configure a couple of things that's going to be on the hardware, and therefore there is a dependency on the dynamic config brigade in ONOS to provide the framework for that support to come in. But that's slated for Q1 next year.
Okay, so what would be helpful? So now I understand what the relative to everything else. If you look at the follow-on slides, and there's a little bit of a format here, but we can change it. Every one of the features on that very first slide that I showed you, there's a template here, trying to boil it down to just a slightly longer description of what's going on. Are there any open issues that need to be addressed? What are the requirements? That is, if you were to spell out to achieve feature A, you need to meet requirements X, Y, and Z. We need to record X, Y, and Z here. So it's just a little bit more depth on that particular feature. And so it would be helpful for the Fabric to translate this into, what should we try to plan in the next release? What gets pushed off to a future one, and that sort of kind of analysis of it. So again, these are all drill downs that we will go through in more detail when we do actual planning. But the more work we can get in here ahead of time, the better. Yeah, I see. There's some of these are just now people are starting to put stuff in here. It's also a reality check on, it's all great to write down this work and try and prioritize it. We don't have that many people. This would be a place to call out. There's no way this is going to get done if we don't get more people on it. Oh, Light and Write Cord now has a whole bunch more requirements. This needs to be upgraded. We had a great talk with Tom Enshuk yesterday. Again, I didn't intend to go too deep on any one of these, but please take a look at them, and anything that you can do to to embellish these and add out and flesh them out, please go ahead and do that. All right, I think that's, at some point we will come back and try to organize work around brigades. That hasn't really happened yet, although there was some. Charles, do you know anything about the university that said they would do the virtual ETH?
I don't know their progress right now. I can try to reach them and see if they have any update on this.
Thanks. I think it's something that would get immediately used if we had it. All right, so that was the discussion, sort of at an organizational level. Are there issues or topics that were missed here? Does everyone feel as overwhelmed by how much needs to be done as I do? And just coming back here, we really have to figure out how to get more people involved and or just push stuff off to the future, because there's no way we're going to make it through all of this.
Yeah.
I think we need to figure out where the cut line is.
Yeah.
Because it's quite a bit of work. The other thing, though, is when do we want to do release planning?
Good question. So we could do release planning after the 1st of January. We could. I would kind of prefer to do it in late December, but I understand there's an argument that until one releases out the door, no one wants to think about the next one. But my experience with the last release was that during that month-long period of putting out release candidates, which basically we've got a feature freeze, and if you're not fighting a bug, you're probably starting to work on the next thing. And I would like to have clarity in what the right next thing is before that happens. So I would vote for mid-December. No comments?
Yeah, no. I think we have to see. I'm kind of hoping that this release won't take as long to put out the door as the last one. So we'll see.
I hope so as well. I mean, there's enough quasi-continuous integration going on that.
Yeah.
I think we're in better shape than we were a few months ago.
Yeah, we don't have to build out the pod manually anymore. So that's a big thing. So you know, we're checking every day that the latest changes still work. Okay, by work, there's still parts of it missing, but well, at least we can see that it builds out and is deployed correctly. We still don't deploy the fabric automatically or VTN automatically, but that's maybe something I need to work on with the people concerned.
So does everyone know what understand, and I'm looking back at Mysterious Decision now instead of ahead, what the priorities are for release planning, for sprint planning tomorrow? I think there's been enough conversation.
Not really. Yeah, I mean,
there's an epic that corresponds, one or two epics that correspond to every one of these features. And each one of those epics has a set of stories that are anywhere from 10% to 90% completed. The objective should be to get each feature into a viable state, define what that state is, and get it to that viable state. It may not be 100% of what we originally planned, but it is not. There are no dangling features there. It is tied off in some way. So at the minimum, we can describe the state of the release, even if it isn't the state that we wish it was. Anything else?
No.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.